Welcome to Audio Tales AI, your destination for captivating stories. Today, we unveil a tale filled with unexpected and life-changing decisions. Remember to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and let's dive in.
So, I've got a pretty wild story to share. It involves me and my wife, Jennifer, who I've been with for 9 years. We were the kind of couple that people imagine when they hear the words high school sweethearts. We met in high school and started dating after a cheesy school dance that everyone was pretty much forced to go to. Everyone thought we were the perfect match, but we had different plans for the future. I wanted to hit the books, study law, and become an attorney. She, on the other hand, dreamed of Hollywood and wanted to become an actress. Sure, I was supportive, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a bit nervous about how we'd make it work. See, I'd be knee-deep in law books while Jennifer would be auditioning all over the country. I graduated a year before her because, funny enough, even though she was 2 years older than me, she was a grade below. I never got to the bottom of that mystery. Every time I asked, she'd get defensive. Looking back, I reckon if I'd known the real reason, we might have called it quits right then and there. Trust me, you will understand later. After high school, I shipped off to law school out of state, and we ventured into the land of long-distance relationships. Yeah, I can already hear you saying bad idea. But I was determined to give it a shot. We'd chat every night, and I'd visit for holidays and special occasions. Sure, sometimes she couldn't chat for one reason or another, but I didn't read much into it. After she finished high school, she dropped a bomb. She wanted to study acting in Europe. Long distance in the same country was one thing, but an entire ocean between us had me worried, but she reassured me, promising endless phone calls and nightly chats. Time flew by with her in Europe studying acting and me back here, nose buried in law textbooks. I met a lot of interesting people, some of whom happened to be women, but I kept things friendly. After all, I had law school exams to ace and a bar exam to prepare for. Fast forward a few years. I graduated law school, passed the bar exam, and landed a job at a mid-sized law firm handling corporate contracts. Not exactly a thrill ride, but it paid the bills. Meanwhile, Jennifer was back in the States, auditioning left and right, but mostly collecting a string of failures. Finally, we tied the knot officially, although we'd been together for years by then. I slowly moved up the ranks at the law firm while she scored a few minor acting roles. We traded our tiny apartment for a house in Virginia. The price tag was hefty, but thanks to my stable job and good credit, we managed to get a mortgage. Then it happened. The CEO of my firm got caught up in an embezzling scandal. The firm went belly up, and suddenly, my job evaporated. We'd racked up some debt, and if we couldn't make the mortgage payments, we were on the fast track to getting kicked out of our new house. When I broke the news to my wife, we had a good cry together and started brainstorming ways to stay afloat. We thought about selling our stuff or her working a part-time gig flipping burgers. Unfortunately, these plans were like sticking a band-aid on a sinking ship. It wouldn't even be enough. With our mortgage deadline closing in, the pressure was on. Then just a few days before we faced financial doom, my wife hit me with some exciting news. She'd landed a big TV contract. She was all hush-hush about the details, saying it was top secret and wouldn't even be made public. It seemed a bit fishy to me, but desperate times called for desperate measures, right? So time goes on. My wife was an actress with more and more experience, and come on, we've all heard how TV shows will go to great lengths to avoid spoilers and such. So I didn't look into it. Besides, the paycheck she was raking in was enough to cover the mortgage. Because of this, life was back on track, and I was on cloud 9. I almost wish I could have stayed blissfully unaware, living that lie, but our marriage was already starting to smell like yesterday's fish. Half a year flew by. We were worry-free. No more nightmares about losing our home. I even found a new job at a smaller law firm just 3 months later. They were more about public advocacy than corporate jobs, and although the pay was less, it felt good to help regular folks. Meanwhile, my wife's acting career seemed to be on a rocket ride to the moon. The paycheck grew year on year, but she played her cards close to her chest, not revealing much about the gig. Over time, I started to smell a rat. It didn't seem too much to ask to want to know a bit about what she was doing, especially when it was raking in the dough for our mortgage. But I brushed it off, convincing myself I was being paranoid and decided to let it slide again. After all, I had bigger fish to fry with my new job and some personal development stuff. Speaking of personal development, I took up a new diet and pledged to hit the gym 3 times a week. My wife, Jennifer, too, was putting in the effort. She dressed to the nines and put on makeup before heading out. Strangely, we hardly got intimate anymore, let alone go out on dates, so her looking like $1 million was a bit baffling. I mean, TV does have high standards, but little did I know the real show she was putting on. Thinking back, you really can't make this up. The plot thickened when one day, an anonymous angel decided to share her secret with me. I walked into work to find a plain white envelope in my desk drawer. On it was my name with the words "Read right away." Inside were pictures of Jennifer in a setting looking suspiciously like a strip club, engaged in activities that made my jaw drop. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake, some nasty prank I could laugh about in the future. The photos weren't exactly crystal clear and could be mistaken for someone else. I clung to the hope that it was all just a misunderstanding or simply a joke, but nobody came to tell me it was, and my worries grew. I knew I had to dig deeper. With some cash stashed away from pro bono work I'd done before landing my current job, I decided to hire a private investigator. I didn't exactly have the time or the stomach to sneak around strip clubs or worse. Besides, if my suspicions were unfounded, I'd be putting my wife through unnecessary distress. The private investigator wasn't cheap, but he was thorough. He traced the origin of the photos and got down in the mud on his knees to reveal what was going down. The report landed on my desk a day later, along with high-resolution pictures that drove the point home. There, it was in black and white. My wife, Jennifer, my sweetheart of 9 years, was playing the lead role at a high-end swingers club. My heart sank, and pressure built up in my throat. I could feel it pounding against my rib cage. The shock of what I had uncovered hit me like a bucket of ice-cold water. 9 years of marriage, plans of having kids once the mortgage was off our backs, all left hanging in the balance. I was blindsided, betrayed. My Jennifer, after all we've been through and survived together, I needed answers. So that night, I sat in the living room waiting for her return. It took a few hours into the dark of night for her to walk through the door. I noticed her being surprised at finding me awake. Usually, I'd be sound asleep by the time she returned. Looking back, I should have seen it as a red flag, but, hey, they don't call it hindsight for nothing. The nuclear evidence sat heavy in my pocket, but I wanted to hear her out first. I asked her point blank, "Why were you working for a swingers club?" She seemed to freeze. "Babe, you must be confused. I don't work at any such place. What makes you say this? Where is this coming from? What makes you jump to such conclusions?" I felt a rush of anger, but managed to keep my cool. I insisted she come clean. Jennifer kept denying and giving me the look as if I'm crazy. That's when I brought out the pictures. Laying them out one by one, I watched her face closely. Each glance she took seemed to drain color from her face, the guilt radiating from her like heat from a furnace. The slight doubt I might have had about the photos being hers vanished. But instead of more lies or a defensive outburst, she broke down sobbing. She claimed it was all for the mortgage to save our home. It was all for us. "You must understand that I'm ashamed. Look at what I've become. I had to do this for us, but I couldn't tell you. I just had to keep it hidden." But my betrayal radar was beeping louder than ever. I pointed out to her that her fear of my disappointment didn't give her the right to stab me in the back. Her apology felt like a band-aid on a broken bone. She tried to reason that she never meant to hurt me and didn't even want me to find out. What the hell? Why? Is she serious? This excuse could never be enough for what she did. I then questioned her future plans. After all, I'd secured a new job a few months ago, and she could have quit then. We could have handled the mortgage without her nighttime escapades. She seemed at a loss for words, and frankly, I didn't need to hear any more. Suddenly, everything began to click into place. The designer labels hanging on the coat racks, the expensive decor around our home, her $1,000 clothes. How could I have been so blind? The realization hit me like a punch in the gut. Jennifer was no longer the humble actress. She had become a highly paid sexy time symbol. One last question hung in the air. Did you enjoy it? The money, the fame, all of it. She remained silent, and the silence stretched miles for me. Finally, she asked, "What do you want me to do? Do you want me to quit?" At this point, I was fighting back tears. How could I trust her? We stood there in silence, like two statues in a crumbling monument of marriage, hoping for a miracle. My life felt like a cheesy joke. Then she broke the silence, pleading for a second chance, and vowing to quit the next day. I wish I could just stay cold and kick her out. I'm sorry to say this, but it's the truth. I should have said no. That would have been the right thing to do, and God knows I came close. But I couldn't bring myself to utter the word divorce. The roots of who I am, who we are together, and grew into, it felt like I couldn't. Instead, I found myself saying, "Okay." I gave her a second chance. Her to the club to confirm she was really quitting. In front of me, my wife squared things off with her boss. My fist clenched at the side of his self-satisfied smirk. After this emotional ordeal, we left together. I decided to take a week off from work and reconnect with my wife. We tried revisiting our days as love-struck teenagers, the sweet nothings, the silly pranks, the laughter. It felt nostalgic, and for a moment, I truly believed we could salvage our relationship. As bizarre as it sounded, my wife's previous job at the swingers club had saved our house. A hard pill to swallow for me, the so-called breadwinner of the family. But she quit right before my eyes, and we now had more time for each other. Another week rolled by, and she began applying for new jobs. Around the same time, my law firm assigned me to handle a $1 million lawsuit requiring me to travel to Indiana. The thought of going long distance again made me apprehensive. However, my wife's assurances gave me the courage to accept the job. We bid each other a passionate farewell at the airport filled with promises, hugs, and kisses. As I left, I felt a mix of excitement for my new role and anxiety over trusting Jennifer again. So here I was trying to trust my wife to remain faithful while I was away or end the marriage. I chose trust. You might judge me for it. Either way, just when things were looking up, the universe decided to test me further. I had been weak. I showed I wasn't to be strong, so my cheesy life had to shift in gear for me to learn. The first few weeks of the new job were promising. I was defending young teens on the brink of juvenile detention, rewarding work that I had been seeking. Despite the work, I made sure to ring up my wife every evening. However, after a few weeks, I noticed a shift. Sometimes she wouldn't be available or wouldn't answer at all. She had her reasons, of course, the job hunt, errands to run, which I swallowed hook, line, and sinker. Then came a cryptic text message at work one day. It was from the anonymous angel who had first alerted me to my Jennifer's secret life. The message brought back a wave of unease, and my heart began pounding again. I quickly shot off a reply and set up a meeting at a local restaurant the following Tuesday. The week couldn't have gone slower, but Tuesday finally rolled around. I wrapped up work by 5 p.m. and drove to the restaurant. I got there a bit early, ordered the first thing I saw on the menu, and settled into my seat. Not that I was interested in the food. My attention was entirely on the mystery guest who was about to turn my life upside down. Just after 6 p.m., an elegant woman walked through the restaurant doors. Instinctively, I knew she was the one I was expecting. As she approached my table, she introduced herself. "My name's Nancy, and you're Jessica's husband, right?" "Yes," I responded. My curiosity piqued. "How did you get those pictures?" She let out a heavy sigh before answering. "We worked at the same club. I quit last week." She paused, looking at me carefully before elaborating. "I should have come forward sooner, but I feared losing my job. Now that I've left that dreadful place, I think it's time you heard the full story." A whirlwind of emotions gripped me: nervousness, excitement, uncertainty. What was I about to uncover about my wife? "Go on," I said, leaning forward in anticipation. Nancy exhaled, then began. "Jessica and I were co-workers. We shared the same shift and often spent our breaks together. I had been there for 3 years before she showed up. I helped her settle in, unaware that she was hiding her marital status. Every time I asked her if this was the job she really wanted, she confidently replied, yes. And I believed her. At first, she would clock out promptly after her shift, heading straight home. But over time, I noticed changes. She began spending more time with the patrons and staff. Our club attracted many actors, and Jessica seemed to bond especially well with them. She also started showing up at work in increasingly lavish outfits. This wasn't unusual for the job, but Jessica was going all out. Nancy then shared how one night, Jessica invited her to a nightclub after work. They both ended up pretty drunk, though Nancy drank less as she had to work the next morning. Nancy, taking responsibility for Jessica's state, booked an Uber and decided to see her home. On their ride back, Jessica asked Nancy why she worked at the club. Nancy told her the truth, the need for money and her failed attempt at landing a job elsewhere. When Nancy asked Jessica the same, she initially said it was to pay her mortgage, but then she admitted that she now worked there because she liked the luxury the job afforded her. Nancy then dropped a nuclear bombshell on me, even bigger than all mentioned before. Jessica, in her drunken state, blurted out that I sounded like her husband. I was horrified. "I knew you must have been in the dark, so I took those secret photos to alert you. Using social media, I found your workplace, left the envelope in your cubicle, and hoped for the best." I was stunned. My mind replaying the night. I had confronted my wife. "You started for us. But you kept going for you." I had told her. My gut instinct was right, and I regretted not trusting it. I regret acting like a weak simp during this. Nancy, noticing my silence, waited for me to respond. I thanked her for her honesty and revealed my decision to file for divorce. With that, Nancy left the restaurant. But something still felt off. As I was preparing to file for divorce, I received a shocking letter. The hits kept on coming. Jessica had beaten me to it, accusing me of abuse, mistreatment, and even infidelity. The absurd accusations were backed by a photo of Nancy and me at the restaurant. Suddenly, it dawned on me. Jessica had been spying on me. Overwhelmed by rage and anxiety, I realized I had to stay composed. Despite the damning evidence and my wife's public slander on social media, I knew the truth. My first step was to rehire the same private investigator, armed with a trove of evidence against my deceitful wife. I was ready to fight back. Jessica may have made the first move against me, but I was determined to make her regret it. I compiled all the information from the private investigator and stored backups on my phone and computer. Next, I messaged Nancy, asking if she'd testify for me at the divorce hearing, as my wife had snapped a picture of our conversation and was accusing me of infidelity and worse. Nancy's reply came after a full day. "Yes. Just let me know when." I texted back, informing her that the hearing was set for next month. I spent the night organizing everything and preparing myself for the final end to my wife's deceitful games. Fast forward a month, the day of the divorce hearing finally arrived. I picked up Nancy, and we drove to the courthouse in Virginia. I had her take a seat early in the courtroom. I wanted my wife to remain unaware of Nancy's presence until it was her turn to testify. After all, if my wife could blindside me with more lies, I was justified in surprising her with the truth. I met with my attorney too, who arrived 15 minutes after Nancy and me. My wife made her entrance 45 minutes later, accompanied by her extended family, a well-dressed man who I assumed was her attorney, and a young girl who bore a resemblance to my wife. A few minutes later, the judge entered, and the hearing began. The opening statement by my wife's attorney was shocking. He accused me of the very infidelity that I had accused my wife of. He claimed I forced her to quit her job, refused to help her find new employment, and made false accusations against her when I found a better paying job. To top it all off, he argued that I wished to deny her alimony, leaving her penniless. The worst allegation came next. I couldn't have made this stuff up in my wildest dreams. Apparently, I was refusing to provide any support for our supposed daughter who needed financial aid. He requested the court to compel me to make alimony payments to my wife following the divorce. I was stunned. My wife had never mentioned having a daughter, and neither had her family. We had never planned on having children, let alone an 11 or 12-year-old girl. As I tried to make sense of the revelations, I remembered a puzzling reaction my wife had had to a question in high school. It dawned on me then. She must have dropped out to hide a pregnancy. All these years, I believed we had no secrets. Yet she had kept this enormous one hidden in plain sight. I had no time to dwell on the startling revelation. However, the divorce hearing was well underway. My God. This hit me hard, but I couldn't have a soft spot anymore and be weak. I had to fight for my life right now. So then it was our turn, and the fight was on. My attorney cleared his throat before addressing the judge. "Your Honor, they've misrepresented my client at every turn. Not a single instance of infidelity on his part can be substantiated. The photographs and questions presented are insufficient to prove such a claim. Moreover, we have solid evidence that it's his spouse who's been involved in rampant infidelity. Please refer to Exhibits A, B, and C, which show the defense's client openly fessing to deceitful behavior for financial gain. These actions don't speak to the character of a trustworthy person, especially one who misleads the court." The judge took a moment to review the documents before proceeding. "I see your point, but allegations without sufficient evidence don't hold much water." My attorney then moved on to the next matter. "As for the supposed child in question, Your Honor, this is the first time we're hearing of her existence. My client was unaware of her existence and never consented to such an arrangement." My wife's attorney quickly jumped in to counter this. "Your Honor, the child is not recognized by the defense due to personal conflicts with her mother. However, we can provide documentation confirming her lineage, and we believe it's in the best interest of the child to receive financial support from her biological father." With that, my wife's attorney introduced the young girl to the court, who would apparently testify against me. The daughter took the stand. "My mommy told me who my real daddy is, and it's him," she said, pointing at me. My heart sank as I watched her lie under oath. The judge asked her to tell the truth, but she insisted that I was her real father. My attorney cross-examined the child, who seemed coached to repeat her false claims. It was a heart-wrenching sight, but I couldn't falter now. After a brief questioning, my attorney called Nancy to the stand. She calmly shared her experiences working with my wife at the swingers club and the confession she had witnessed. She also clarified that she had never met my wife's daughter during her time there. Nancy's testimony was compelling, and it brought out my wife's anguish as she squirmed in her seat. However, it wasn't enough to sway the judge in my favor. My wife's attorney argued that Nancy's evidence was anecdotal and insufficient to prove infidelity or a lack of financial responsibility. As the hearing dragged on, I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. The case felt like a tug of war between truth and lies, with my wife determined to paint me as the villain. Finally, it was my turn to take the stand. I kept my emotions in check as I recounted the events leading up to the divorce, the mysterious photos, and my discovery of my wife's secret life. My attorney urged the judge to consider my wife's financial statements, which showed her income from the club, as well as the anonymous letter I had received alerting me to her actions. However, my wife's attorney argued that the anonymous letter was fabricated and that I had manipulated the evidence to paint her in a negative light. The judge appeared to be skeptical of both sides, and I couldn't predict which way the ruling would go. After what felt like an eternity, the judge announced a recess and asked both parties to meet in a private conference room to discuss a potential settlement. As my attorney and I stepped into the conference room, I couldn't help but feel defeated. My wife's attorney had put up a strong defense, and the judge's skepticism only added to my anxiety. My attorney, however, reassured me that we still had a chance to reach a fair settlement. He suggested that we offer my wife a lump sum payment to avoid a protracted legal battle. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but I agreed. We presented the offer to my wife and her attorney, who seemed more open to the idea of a settlement than a continued courtroom battle. After some negotiation, we reached an agreement that would grant my wife a lump sum payment and end the divorce proceedings. As I signed the settlement papers, I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and sadness. My marriage was officially over, and I would be making a significant financial sacrifice to ensure a clean break. The divorce proceedings had revealed a side of my wife that I had never known, and the revelation of her secret child had shattered any remaining trust. It was a painful chapter of my life that I was eager to put behind me. A month later, the divorce was finalized, and I made the agreed-upon lump sum payment to my ex-wife. She had walked away from the marriage with a sizable sum of money, but I was finally free from the web of lies and deceit that had entangled us. I had lost my wife, my home, and a significant portion of my savings, but I had gained something invaluable, my freedom and the opportunity to start anew. I moved into a small apartment, focusing on rebuilding my life and career. It was a challenging journey, but I was determined to leave behind the painful memories of my past marriage and move forward. As for my ex-wife, she continued to pursue her acting career, but I had no desire to keep tabs on her. Our paths had diverged, and it was time for us to move on separately. In the end, my cheesy high school sweetheart romance had unraveled in the most unexpected and painful way. But I had learned valuable lessons about trust, deception, and the importance of standing up for the truth, even when the odds were stacked against me. I was no longer the naive teenager who had fallen in love all those years ago. I had grown stronger, wiser, and more resilient, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead in my journey through life.
Thank you for tuning in to Audio Tales AI. If you enjoyed today's story, remember to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support keeps these stories coming. Until next time, remember, love, trust, and understanding are the foundation of a great relationship. But betrayal, lust, and deception make for the best YouTube videos.